The Wes Penra Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The First Level of Learning. http://wespenry.com. Present and Future Challenges, PFC, Section. PFC Paper Number 4, The Animus, Artificial Intelligence and Blank Slate Technology. By Wes Penra, Tuesday, June 14, 2011. 1. The Labyrinth Group, ACIO, and the NSA, a background. The NSA, National Security Agency, is a government organization whose forerunner was the General Services Special Projects Laboratory, SPL. SPL was formed in 1938, and very little is known about it. It was not meant to be an official body. Then, in 1949, the Armed Forces Security Agency, AFSA, was created, on May 20. On November 4, 1952, the NSA was officially formed and instigated by Harry S. Truman. A year later, in 1953, SPL was folded into the NSA as an unacknowledged department, and ultimately, the ACIO number, Advanced Contact Intelligence Organization, was folded into the SPL as an unacknowledged research laboratory. ACIO, in fact, is older than both the NSA and the AFSA, as it was created in 1940, 2 years after SPL. It was 2 levels deep and its code name was Blackroot. The reason for all this secrecy and security was not due to war or intelligence gathering on antagonistic countries or leaders, as many people think. Rather, it was, and is, because of the ET issue. It's mainly a race against whom is going to get ET technology for military applications first. The Labyrinth Group, which was created by code name 15, more about him in the next subsection, came into existence much later, in 1963, with its main purpose to learn how to master blank slate technology, BST, to counter an alien invasion, something which will be discussed in details later in this paper. In review, the Neruda interviews contain more correct information than the Anderson interviews. See Wes Penra, PFC Paper Number 3, The True Story About the Wing Makers, The Labyrinth Group, and SAALM. May 26, 2011, for reference. In fact, as explained in the above reference, the WMM was taken over by the Labyrinth Group and the Kortum, the latter being an alien faction working with the Labyrinth Group. After that, the WMM became more esoteric and purposely made less comprehensible for the public. The new owner of the Wing Makers site, Mahunahi of the Kortum, wanted people to believe that it was mostly myth to defuse the truth that had been released by Dr. Neruda, a defector from the same group. So, for the record, and this is coming directly from the horse's mouth, Dr. Neruda, whom I've been connected with, the Neruda interviews are what is containing the most truth of all the WMM, in conjunction with the Ancient Arrow project, although the latter has been altered by Mahunahi, aka James. The rest of the WMM still contains truth, like in the case of the Sovereign Integral, the Energetic Heart, and most of how the human template is constructed, but needs to be read very carefully to distinguish between truth and falsehood. 2. 15. The Man Behind the Number. Some of this will be repetition from previous paper in order to give the whole story, so a lot of additional information has been added. According to the Neruda interviews, 15 was born in 1934 and was only 22 years old when he joined the ACIO in 1956. He was a renegade genius from the universities who wanted to build computers powerful enough to be used for time travel. He came to the ACIO from Bell Laboratories due to an alliance between the two organizations at that time. In 1958, the Kortum became known to the ACIO, and due to 15's incomparable genius he was the obvious choice for being the one working with them. The Kortum found his obsessive interest in time travel interesting, and somewhere along the line they told him about blank slate technology, BST, a very special form of time travel, which the Kortum had been trying to develop for some time. 15 was hooked as soon as he got to know about it. While working within the ACIO, 15 was approached by the Zeta Greys, who wanted to offer him a full-scale technology transfer program, TTP number, but 15 turned them down. He did not fully trust them, and he had already a similar, and better, program set up with the Quartum. Also, the Greys were much less organized and united than the Quartum, and the least thing 15 wanted was instability. Albeit, there was something the Greys had which the Quartum lacked: memory implants and their genetic hybridization technologies. After much consideration, he decided to make a deal with them as well, but outside of the organization. He did not want too close of a relationship with the Zetas. In exchange, we provided them with access to our information systems relative to genetic populations and their unique predisposition across a variety of criteria including mental, emotional, and physical behaviors, and they also provided us with their genetic findings. We need to keep in mind here that there are several different bands of Greys, and not all of them are from Zeta Reticuli I and II, some of them are not even from our galaxy. Greys are pretty common in the universe. However, even the Zeta Greys are not united, and different factions have different imperatives. Something many of them have in common, although working within different, unrelated groups, sometimes antagonistic to each other, is their genetic research agenda. They are a dying race and need genetics from the living library, Earth and its life forms, to strengthen their biokind. Their deteriorating bodies have to a large degree lost their ability to host an information cloud, soul, and have therefore become more and more like artificial intelligence. Factions of the Greys made treaties with humans already in the early 1950s through the Eisenhower administration, if not even earlier, through Hitler, and offered TTP in exchange for being allowed to abduct humans and animals in small quantities for their research. As if this wasn't bad enough, the Greys broke their agreement and abducted far more people than the government had agreed to, and in addition, the Greys did not report each abduction case to the government either, which they had promised. I am not sure if 15 was unaware of this fact when he made this new agreement with another faction of the Greys, or if he was willing to pay the price of deception for the exchange of technology on a conscious basis. His reasoning is unknown to me, unfortunately, as it would tell us more about this man's character. Whatever the case, the Greys were clearly interested in our information databases, and this was their primary agenda in regards to the ACIO, as it looked like. This particular band of Greys reported directly to 15, because they saw him as someone with an IQ similar to themselves, and regarded him as the CEO of Earth. In many ways, he actually was. In 1963, 200 Quartum members under the supervision of their leader, Mahunahi, and 118 brilliant human scientists joined 15 in the project of building the Labyrinth Group, which was somewhat connected to, but mostly separated from, the ACIO and the NSA. By using his influence, and with some help from his alien friends, 15 soon found himself in charge of both the ACIO and the Labyrinth Group, which was one of his big goals. In completing this, he had great help from Dr. Nerutha's stepfather, who was a high executive of the ACIO and supportive of 15. He assisted in putting 15 as the CEO of the ACIO. 15 could now put a cloak of secrecy around both groups in a way he couldn't have done prior to that. He now had free hands to develop BST. A little bit later in this paper, I am going to explain why 15 and the Quartum are so interested in this time travel technology, and how the technology works, and it has to do with prophecy, and an alien race from another galaxy, an invader force, whose purpose is to establish themselves here and steal our genetics. However, in a much more aggressive way than the Greys. At least, this is what the Quartum has been telling the Labyrinth Group. 15 soon made the Labyrinth Group quite a wealthy organization by selling soft technology to the government and certain major companies in the US and the rest of the world. These technologies came from the Quartum, and some from the Greys, but 15 kept most of it within his group, and only sold what he thought would be safe and not used for destructive purposes. This is the main source of income for the group, to be able to finance their research. Then, what 15 considers safe technology is up for debate. 15, for obvious reasons, is a very private person, and he is working on BST more or less 24/7. That's mainly all he does. The number 15 has to do with security clearance within the ACIO and the Labyrinth group. Levels 1 to 11 are assigned to the ACIO only, and 12 to 14 are all within the Labyrinth group. In fact, they are the Labyrinth group. Level 15 is reserved for 15 himself, hence his nickname. His real name is not known to me. So how does he look? He is now, as of this writing, on his 77th year. There is a description of him in the Neruda interviews, and a photo taken of him at his resort in Hawaii in 1978, when he was 44 years old. It was put in circulation, without 15's consent, I'm sure. This picture has been verified to me by reliable sources as being genuine. 15 is of average height, and when Dr. Neruda defected, he had shoulder-long hair, grey, usually worn in a ponytail. Neruda said he always reminded him of Pablo Picasso with long hair, and the same penetrating eyes. They are also mischievous, like you'd expect from a child who's done something wrong on the surface, but underneath, they've created something wonderful. It's just that nobody understands the wonderful part yet. His country of origin is Spain, which is interesting, because Mahunahi, the leader of the Kortum alien race, who supposedly took over the Wingmaker's site, has a Spanish accent and lets the people know in Hempel's recorded interviews that he was born in Spain, outside Barcelona. If he's a Kortum, that's of course misinformation, but if the person whom Hempel met in his home in the summer of 2008 was 15, it explains both the accent and his height. Hempel didn't mention Mahu's height, but if he was a Kortum, he would have looked slightly different from a normal human. The evidence speaks of a person who looks quite normal, of about average height, visiting Hempel in his home, and unless someone else within the Labyrinth group is from Spain as well, 15 fits the profile. Just some food for thought. 15 is on a life mission. Some of us can relate to that. Ever since we were little kids we knew there is something we need to do and we need to find out what it is. 15 found out early in life that he wanted to work with developing time travel technologies. He probably didn't know why he had that inner drive, but when other kids were playing regular children's games, 15 was already thinking about time travel. In school and the universities, he quickly outsmarted his professors and didn't keep quiet about it. He was outspoken and eager to show what he knew. Of course, us being aware of how things work in the field of education, the professors, instead of taking this brilliant young man to heart, they felt threatened by him and often kicked him out from their school of learning. His already off-the-chart IQ was boosted exponentially when he was subjected to the Kortum's Accelerated Intelligence Technology, 8 number. Then, after he had selected the cream of the crop from the scientific core of the ACIO, he let them undergo the same procedure in an effort to create a team which could successfully develop BST number 2.1, a cloak of secrecy, 2 different defense weapons and hidden agendas. 15 has already from the beginning been very secretive about everything he is doing. Nothing whatsoever which is discussed within the Labyrinth group is allowed to be discussed with anybody outside the organization, not even with life partners. Hence, Dr. Neruda is the first, and only person so far who has defected from the Labyrinth group and started talking both about the Animus problem, which will be addressed in this paper, and BST. Dr. Neruda says in his interview, 15 withholds his knowledge from the media and the general public because he doesn't want to be seen as a savior of humanity, the next messiah. And he especially doesn't want to be seen as some fringe lunatic that should be locked up, or worse yet, assassinated because he is so misunderstood. The instant he stepped forward with what he knows, he would lose his privacy and his ability to discover BST. And this he'll never do. Most people who know about this greater reality are fearful of stepping into the public scrutiny because of the fear of being ridiculed. You have to admit that the general public is frightened by what it doesn't understand, and they do kill the messenger. To fully understand why this is such a secret, I need to touch on the subject of the Animus before we go into them in detail. Briefly, the anima or enemy, plural of animus, are apparently an alien, ontocyboenergetic * life form from another galaxy who are planning on coming here to Earth as an invader force, as conquerors, but also to get hold of our DNA. Due to a catastrophe in their past, they developed into a machine race with artificial intelligence. In other words, they lack what we call a soul, or information cloud. Their intention is to once again be able to have soul carriers, biological bodies, biokins, which can carry a soul, and to have information clouds inhabit them. If they don't, they cannot be part of the evolvement towards being one with the Prime Creator, and their part in the universal cycles will be very limited. Therefore they are planning on invading this planet, steal our DNA, and perhaps our whole biokin template, and kill off the rest of the population. So why Earth? Why travel from a distant galaxy to invade us, a small planet in the outskirts of the Milky Way? First of all, we are not just a small planet. Our biokin is very special and part of an intergalactic experiment called the Living Library. Yes, the Living Library was interfered with some 300,000 years ago when the Anunnaki took over this planet, but our soul carriers are still very special, and carry traits which are quite unusual in this galaxy and beyond, namely, a wide range of emotions. Still, we are not the only target for the Animus. They have set out probes in our solar system as well as in others. This year, in 2011, they are scheduled to set up a new probe close to Earth to study our development as a human species. Last they checked, around 12,000 years ago, we were still not developed enough for them to interfere, but 15 and the Quartum are afraid that we are now. This means that an invasion could be scheduled by the Animus shortly after the probe has scanned our present biokin/biomind. This is where BST comes into the picture. With the gain of certain knowledge, 15 is hoping to be able to stop the invasion by using his time travel technology. Details about how this works will be discussed in a separate section below. Thus, we can see from 15's point of view why he wants to keep this whole thing secret. However, Dr. Neruda didn't agree with 15's approach to use BST to stop this alien race. Just like LPGC, the Labyrinth group have their form of remote viewing, RV number, similar to extra neurosensing, ENS number, but although the subject of ENS is not supposed to be able to detect the neurosensor, or ENS, the person who remote views, the wingmakers detected the ENS used by 15 and they started to probe her. When 15 established that the beings whom detected her were actually wingmakers of the central race, he got cold feet and stopped all future RV sessions. He was afraid that the wingmakers would jeopardize his BST plans and stop him. This was another reason why Dr. Neruda defected. He believed that the wingmakers' defense weapon installed on our planet would be more effective than BST. He said that all logic showed this to be true, but 15 strongly disagreed. So how can the 7 wingmakers' sites be defensive weapons? It's because, due to extensive RV sessions, Dr. Neruda came to the conclusions that among other things, they are DNA triggers. It is known inside the Labyrinth group that these sites are supposedly meant to activate something in our DNA. This hypothesis alone makes a great connection to the renegade group of Pleiadians whom Barbara Marciniak is channeling. The latter is, in their own words, here to help us activate dormant parts of our DNA. Although they have not mentioned anything in their lectures about the tributary zone in general, they have made hints to that such exist, and of course the Pleiadians are not the only alien race interested in seeing our DNA evolve. The Anima, in more clear language, is after our source code, the code which the Lyrans and their group of original planners implanted in our DNA, the code which is being decoded as we speak by gamma rays transmitted from the Sun and the galactic center by the Founders, who appear in segments, in form of light waves. By understanding this source code, they can prevent us from evolving. At least, this is what makes all the sense to me, but there is another twist to this story, as we shall see when we move on. The purpose of this activation was still a mystery when Dr. Neruda defected, but Neruda himself thinks it has something to do with stimulating our fluid intelligence and enabling sensory inputs that have been dormant within our central nervous system, and he is right. The enhancement of the central nervous system, still according to both Dr. Neruda and Marciniak's group, makes the defensive weapon more effective to any alien attack. In fact, it has to do with ascension, the rest is secondary. Dr. Neruda contemplated that the Wingmaker's defensive weapon had to do with rendering our planet invisible to the 2011 probes sent out by the Anima, and in a sense, that is true, as we shall see in the solution papers. Here are Dr. Neruda's own words. The Wingmakers wrote that higher frequencies were emanating from the central universe, and that these 7 sites comprised a collective technology that somehow coordinated these frequencies or higher energies to bring about a shift in the planet's vibratory structure, enabling life on the planet to survive the shift and remain undetected by the Animus. It confirmed that we're dealing with the central race, and that they want the cultural artifacts from the 7 sites to be shared with the public. These elements were connected to the effectiveness of the defensive weapon. They left behind poetry, music, paintings, and even a glossary. It seems to me that all of these elements in addition to the philosophy are connected. Also, I'm suggesting that something fundamentally changes when these materials are absorbed, and perhaps this change, whatever it is, resonates with the technology from the 7 sites. I've absorbed the materials and I've noticed changes. It sure sounds to me that the Wingmaker's sites were left here on Earth by the Lyran/Pleiadian group who were chased away by the Anunnaki, supposedly 400,000 to 500,000 years ago. They are activation sites and defense weapons against those who would try to stop humankind from evolving. The Wingmaker's sites are heavily encoded and encrypted, and Marciniak's Pleiadians say that intruders of any kind will not be able to figure out the source code. Humankind, or parts of us, will evolve. The artwork, original music, and the text is telling the story, but the Lyrans knew, of course, that this material could come into the hands of something like our military-industrial complex and therefore not come out to the public in its pure form, or at all, but they knew it would. This was planned by soul agreements. Dr. Neruda says that he had some profound experiences when he was alone in the caves at the ancient Arrow site in New Mexico, where the first Wingmaker's site is located. Apparently, he had a visitation from the Wingmakers themselves in the cave, more of a perceptual nature than a physical, but still very real. They told him not to trust what 15 was doing, and that he was too involved with the Cortum to see the real solution. It is Dr. Neruda's conviction that the Wingmakers put this defensive weapon on Earth to protect their genetics, us. This was the soul agreement. In a multiverse, where all time is simultaneous, and the founders and the builders think long thoughts because of their long lifespan, we're already planning 300,000 years ago for what is happening now. Dr. Neruda most probably has a soul agreement with the builders and the Wingmakers, to reveal the information to the public, which he did in 1998. These kinds of soul agreements are done in Sitter space, the astral worlds between lives. It was no coincidence that Dr. Neruda got involved with the Labyrinth group, received the information he needed, happened to be in the cave alone and received the message from the Wingmakers. It was all in the plan to get the material out to the public, although Dr. Neruda was of course, like the rest of us, in oblivion as of what his mission was. It was predestined to happen as part of his life mission. Even if the information was distorted afterwards, it doesn't matter. The information triggered the source code and is speeding up our evolution. The source code is still not understood and is not supposed to be. The secrecy and cover-up by the different alien/human groups involved, frenetically trying to decipher a source code they can't even find, is a waste of time. Humankind is evolving and the source code is being triggered every second of the day. The Wingmakers must be the central race, the founders, the original seeders of planets and universes, working in unison with the Lyrans, Vegans, and other species involved in the first seeding of mankind to make sure the source code was hidden in the human genome. The Wingmakers' sites are simply the light switches which send signals in encoded form to the source code, hidden in our genome, and the DNA activation begins. So what determines when the light switches should go off? Well, the Sun does, and the central sun in the middle of the Milky Way galaxy. When the star constellations and the lineup of our solar system with the galactic center is in a straight position with the central sun, i.e. right now, the latter, from its galactic center tributary zones, sends signals to our sun on gamma rays, and from there signals are relayed to the wing maker's sights, which turn on the light switches. It looks like the tributary zones on Earth, which I think are 12 in numbers, not 7 due to that the original planners worked with the 12 system, not the 7 system, are just relay stations. The real tributary zones are hidden on planets in another dimension in the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which we call the Central Sun. As usual, what so often is blinding scientists and highly educated people in the military-industrial complex is that they think everything has to have something to do with weaponry, defensive or offensive in nature. Few are looking in the right direction. No higher evolved beings who are spiritually inclined would suggest a defensive system that has anything to do with violence of any kind. This case is no exception. The wingmaker's sights have nothing to do with defensive attack. So Mahunahi, James of the Wingmakers, is correct in describing the sovereign integral and the grand portal. But if Mahunahi is the head of the Kortum, why on earth is he telling us the truth? Well, he is smart enough to understand what the Wingmaker's sights actually are, something he is very careful to keep a secret from the Labyrinth group. On the other hand, he knows that the source code in our DNA is getting triggered as we speak in many people, and there is little he can do about it. Therefore he took over the Wingmaker's sight after had decided that he could just as well give the public the truth in a watered-down version to get people hooked. But hooked to what? He must have figured that if he gave us the truth about the sovereign integral, our reconnection with our higher selves, i.e. our oversouls, and our journey to find the grand portal, he would have people occupied and it may help him find the source code. Many races out there want access to the source code for different reasons. In addition, according to the Guardians, a certain frequency distortion has been embedded into the Wingmaker's music CDs and some of the paintings and poetry has some advanced code inserted so that it actually could prevent us from having our DNA reactivated. It's all about delaying the reactivation effect until after 2012, when the aligning with the galactic center is happening in full. After 2012, if we haven't taken advantage of what has been sent to us in form of encoded information on gamma rays, it's much harder to get the activation process started. So apparently, if we are to believe Asha Yanadine and her Guardian Alliance, it could be dangerous to follow the spiritual practices Mahunahi suggests when comes to the paintings, and reading the poetry and listening too much on the music CDs could be delaying our reactivation. My own thoughts are that Mahu and the Kortum took over the Wingmakers as an experiment to see how many serious spiritual truth seekers they could attract to their site. They were probably hoping to attract the cream of the crop of active awakened individual and deactivate their DNA, or keeping it dormant while they continue studying all our DNA activation, looking for the hidden source code. The bottom line is that I seriously suspect that the Kortum knows what the real purpose of the Wingmakers' sites are. As we shall see soon, their intention is not only to fool those of us who are awakening, but also to fool the Labyrinth group or any other organization working on a similar project as they do. Does this mean we should avoid the Wingmakers material as if our life depended upon it? No, there is a lot of very important information there, but we should be very careful not to get involved in any of the particular practices that have to do with the paintings and avoid the music CDs to be on the safe side. There are other, more general practices, like breathing exercises, which are just old, common knowledge from Eastern philosophies, and there is no harm done to do them. I actually encourage some of them, like the quantum pause, http://wespenry.com/quantum-pause.htm right parenthesis. In addition, if you like their music, I would suggest you look into some of the New Age composers. Some of them are extremely good. I personally like anything of Duder and of Liquid Mind, to mention two. Both are writing high-quality music which relaxes you and helps you tune into higher frequencies. 3. Accelerated intelligence. Accelerated intelligence is something which the Kortum brought to the group. The purpose is to activate the thalamocortical system of the brain. When they have activated this specific section of the brain, inducing a small functional cluster within this system, it expands the higher order consciousness. These are the neural coordinates of consciousness, pertaining to higher order reasoning, useful to scientific inquiry, mathematics, and general problem solving. This was the technique 15 was subjected to and in his turn let all his employees take advantage of as well. Shortly after this was done to him he got the vision of BST, as a solution to his time travel theories. So how does this technique work? Dr. Neruda is describing it in some details in the Neruda Interviews number 2. Few people realize that their conscious mind only processes about 15 bits of information per second of linear time. However, in vertical time, the unconscious mind is processing approximately 70 to 80 million bits of information. Thus, in normal consciousness, humans are aware of only an infinitesimal amount of the information that is constantly being fed to them at the unconscious level. The Quartum technology was designed to reduce the filtering aspects of the conscious mind and enable the higher frequency information packets to be fed to the conscious mind. In parallel with this effort, the brain circuitry, if you will, is rewired to handle the higher voltage of the information that is being fed to the consciousness, allowing capabilities like photographic memory and abstract thought to coexist. These capabilities become the matrix filter that draws from the unconscious repositories the most relevant information at any particular time based on the problem or task at hand. It's not really a simple question of the quantity of information processing, but rather the relevance of the information in linear time based on the intention of the individual. When one goes through the process of the Quartum technology, their ability to tune into information packets that are relevant to a situation or problem is vastly improved. In most people, when a given situation confronts them, they access their conscious mind and pull out the solution that has served them in the past. Thus, people fall into ruts and patterned behavior, which closes down their access to the unconscious information packets that are based on real-time situation analysis and have extremely high relevancy. This technology accelerates the circulation of information between the conscious and unconscious aspects of the mind to flow in the pattern of an ascending spiral rather than the pattern of a repetitious circle. And because of this it unleashes the innate intelligence of the individual. So you see, the Quartum technology doesn't increase raw intelligence, it simply facilitates the natural intelligence of the individual. I will talk a lot more about vertical time and BST in a moment. The concept of vertical time is imperative for BST to work. But a few other things first. 4. The Quartum, how they supposedly look like. For those familiar with the Wingmakers material, WMM number, it has been a mystery who the Quartum really are. They are presented as a benevolent race, not connected with the ETS that interact with of world's governments, i.e. the Greys or the Reptilians. There is no real public picture of the Quartum that I am aware of. The only thing I've found is the artsy image at wingmakers.com, which doesn't tell us much. Still, I don't believe the Quartum are one single species, and this is another thing we need to learn about aliens: they rarely work alone. Species, as they develop, not always so much spiritually as technologically, and are involved in space travel, have a tendency to join together with other alien species from other star systems in different star confederations. Thus, species with similar imperatives and agendas work together to accomplish their goals. This means that factions of reptilians, greys, insectoids, and humanoids are working closely together as one species when it comes to bringing forth their development as separate species. We have a tendency to think that greys have their agenda, while the reptilians have theirs, and so on. In reality, amongst alien races whom are developed enough to routinely engage in traveling between the stars, this is rarely the case. However, we know how some of them look like due to a description by Dr. Neruda. He says that they stand nearly 3 meters high, almost 10 feet, and have very elongated heads and bodies. Their skin is very fair, almost translucent, like you might expect from a cave dweller. Their eyes are relatively large and have various colors just like our own, except the Quartum have different colors to their eyes depending on their age and, in some instance, their emotional state. What's very unique about the Quartum is that they have an incredibly articulate nervous system that enables them to process virtually everything that occurs within their environment, including the thoughts of another. Which means that when you're in their presence, you need to have control of your thoughts or else you'll potentially offend them. They're very sensitive emotionally. They speak perfect English or French, Italian, Spanish, or most any other language for that matter. They're very gifted linguists and can acquire average language skills in a matter of a few weeks, and operate as masters of the language within a few months. Their minds are like sponges, but like I said before, while they possess incredible mental powers to absorb new information and synthesize it with previous information, they're not necessarily adept at creating new information totally unrelated to existing information. That's precisely what impressed them so much with 15. Furthermore, Dr. Neruda explains to us that their reason for being so interested in BST is because the planet from where they come has become very fragile because its protective atmosphere is degenerating at an alarming rate. This condition has led them to become nocturnal, only coming to the surface at night, and even then, only for short moments. Their outer skin becomes more and more sensitive while their atmosphere becomes less protective. From their perspective, BST would restore their environment. So where have we heard this before? It's a similar story told by Zecharia Sitchin regarding the Anunnaki and their home planet, Nibiru, which needs gold to restore their atmosphere, and it's an ongoing process. These people are miners, and they have not been mining only here on Earth, but on other planets in our solar system and elsewhere, too. I have heard from a source that some of the Kortum is indeed a faction of the earthbound Anunnaki, who stayed behind and still dwell on our planet, mostly underground. They are not the S.A.A.L.M number faction, which works on putting Marduk and his people on the world throne once and for all, but are still loyal to the kingdom, home planet Nibiru, and are working with the Labyrinth group to perhaps, at least officially, solve their planetary issue once and for all. In his description of how the Kortum look like, Dr. Neruda is both describing the Anunnaki and the tall whites, encountered by Charles Hall, who explained that the eye color of the tall whites, some call them tall greys, change as they grow older, and their nervous system is quite sensitive, just like Dr. Neruda says. Before we move on, I'd like to bring up the subject of elongated skulls, which has been a matter of discussion within the UFO community for a long time.